Hello, everybody. Hello, I should have a big giant face right now. If I do have a big giant face, give me a thumbs up. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up or give me a nice happy little face or a sad little face. Let me see your sad little faces. Let me see like surprised. Can I see surprised? What would you look like? None of you? None of you look surprised? No, so, there we go, Thomas. Okay, let's try something else. Let's try oh, you just saw a new puppy for the very first time. What does your face look like when you just see like a cute oh, yeah. Yeah. The church girls, they know what it's like. Okay, what if somebody just tried to serve you Brussels sprouts and you don't really like Brussels sprouts? I like Brussels sprouts, so I'd be like, okay. What if somebody tried to give you like raw fish eggs for dinner? What would your face look like then? Yeah. Okay. The reason that we're talking about expressions today, and we're looking at the way that our faces look, right, when we feel certain things, is because that's sort of how art works, right? Art, we take all those feelings that we have inside and all those expressions that we have on our faces when we think certain things. Those are the sort of expressions that we use when we do art, right? We take what we're feeling and we put it onto the canvas or onto the page or whatever it is that we're working on at the time. So we're going to definitely talk about how we use art as expression. And sometimes it doesn't look like exactly what you think it's going to look like. But before we get started, I want to do a materials check with you. And materials those are the pieces that you need to make sure that your art project is going to work. So I want to make sure that everybody has a Clover. If you have a Clover, hold it up. On the back of your Clover should be a grid, a 3x3 grid, which kind of looks like a bingo board, but not quite. Tic-tac-toe is what it looks like. I have mine on 2 different papers. That's fine. Everybody should have a black piece of construction paper. Nice. Everybody should have at least 6 markers. They can be 3 shades of green, 3 shades of blue. Some of you may have purple. Some of you may have teal. I don't know if anybody ended up with yellow, but some sort of blend. We're looking for the cool tones. And the cool tones, if we look at our color wheel, are the ones that are the blues, the purples, and the green. And why are we dealing with cool tones? Because I want to. Sometimes we just want to work with those. Everybody's going to need a pair of scissors. Okay, so the safe way to hold scissors is to grab them by the sharp pointy part. And if you were to hand them to somebody, you'd hand them you'd be like, here you go. So there's safety first. Please do not poke yourself with scissors. You
Sonia,
should have.
could you make me a co-host?
Yes, I can. I haven't found you yet. That's the problem.
Not Brooke and Chase.
Chase. Okay,
Yes.
I found you there. Ba-ba-ba. There we go. And I was going to make Abby the co-host, so that's not going to work. Where did you go? You totally disappeared. You moved. You're still moving. I think every time somebody logs on, you move. I've almost made 3 different people a co-host. There we go. Okay. So everybody has scissors. Does everybody have a pencil? Like, we didn't give you pencils, but I'm hoping you have one. Mine says, what would Dorothy Parker write? She was a writer, so I don't know what your pencils say. Maybe nothing. You should have a glue stick. Got a glue stick? Okay. Sharpie. Boop. And a ruler. My ruler, you can see right through it. Boop. Well, actually, you could have before I got paint all over it. My ruler, you can tell I use it a lot. You can tell I use it for painting. All right. So those are the supplies that we should have. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing today. We are going to make this beautiful Cubist clover. You may look at that and you may think to yourself, Mrs. Griffin, that is not a clover. It is. It's just a Cubist clover. And we're going to talk about what that means. What is cubism? And why does it look so funny? So I'm going to share my screen with you. And we're going to do a little bit of a PowerPoint. My favorite, which is actually not my favorite because I can't actually see anything when I put these up. So it's always an adventure. I see that there's a hand. Yes. what is your question, young lady?
My question is, I remember last time we did art docent, you forgot to press the record button. So I was wondering if you remembered to press the record button.
I am really, really glad that you reminded me of that. Yes, I did. It is recording, and I appreciate the reminder. Yes. Hopefully I only make I make the mistake once. Sometimes I make the mistake several times, but this one I was hoping to only make once. And I did record eventually. All right. So can everyone see this PowerPoint here? Let me put it on super special PowerPoint mode.
I can see it, Miss Griffin.
Good. And go. Okay. Cubism, artistic movement. See all these cubes? I thought that was very clever. All right. So Cubism is a style of painting. Originally, it was a style of painting, and it developed in the early 1900s. So about, let's see, it's 2021 and 1900 minus, okay, it was about 120 years ago. And what's really cool about Cubist paintings is it shows one object, but from like many different angles at the same time. So let's see here. Here's my mug. I don't know if you can see it, if you can see me in your window, but if you look at my mug, it just looks like a normal mug. Well, what cubists do is even though it's a flat surface, they'll paint the mug from this angle, 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 but they'll put it all on one surface. So it kind of makes it really strange. And then they'll break it apart and they'll throw it into little pieces. I don't get it, but apparently they do. There were two main artists that developed Cubism, and that was Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso. And they thought, why do we have to paint the same old stuff that everybody else paints? Like, why do we have to just it's a mug. Everybody's seen a painting of a mug. Why do we have to do that? They didn't like the constraints of painting things that looked real. So they wanted to take those objects and just kind of mix it up, like make it a little bit more exciting. They were bored with having to paint the same old. So they wanted to show every part of an object all at once, which we live in a three-dimensional world. We can only see three sides of things at once. And they're like, nah, let's show all the sides. Let's show it all. So they usually started by breaking things into geometric shapes, which are usually cubes. And does everybody know what a cube is? Anyone? You all know what cubes are, right? Yeah, it's a
six-sided square.
Yeah, I have a book right in front of me that's like a cube, right? It's just kind of like a three-dimensional square, right?
That's a book?
Yeah, it's a book. It's a very book. Wow. It's called a writer's block. It's a joke. It's a joke. I'll explain it someday. All right. But so it started around 1900. Right. And then it sort of developed. And over time, if you look at this little guy right here, this is actually a Cubist sculpture. So, so other things were created because of Cubism, other kinds of art. And all the information I got was on this webpage right here at kidsbritannica.com. If you've never been to Kids Britannica, you should. It's a very good site for kids. All right. So next slide. Here is on the left, we've got Georges Braque, this big tall guy in the suit. And on the right here, we've got Pablo Picasso. Interesting fact, Pablo Picasso was only 5 feet 3 inches tall. That means he was 1 inch shorter than me. He wasn't a very tall guy. And this painting here is just part of the painting. And it's known as the very first Cubist painting. And what's really interesting is Pablo Picasso took the influence of like African masks, and then he took paintings of people and he broke them into pieces. And everyone's like, that's weird. But you know what? Pablo Picasso became one of the richest and most well-known.
Just popped up on your screen.
Yeah, somebody's drawing something. If you are drawing something, if you are doing something that you should not be doing, please stop. Thank you. Yeah, I don't need other people drawing on my stuff. All right. So there's lots of types of cubism. Like this first one, it looks really weird, right? It looks like you're looking at a brick wall or something carved into a mountain. Originally, cubism was just like shapes drawn in like very neutral colors, kind of like it was more like the idea of breaking apart a shape and breaking apart a picture into different things. And this is actually a portrait of a guy named Daniel Henry. You could sort of see his nose and his eyes and his ears. You could see his hands, and then here he is just broken. Lots of rectangles, lots of overlapping planes and angles, lots of, cool, not boring, neutral colors. But then it moved into more colors. And this is a guy named Juan Gris. And he was actually sort of the third person that helped with Cubism. And he decided that he was going to take it to a whole nother level. He added color, and he also started gluing on newspapers and gluing on garbage and gluing on like just random things he'd find in the street. And he actually invented the collage. And so this is a Cubist idea. This is his breakfast table. So you can sort of see the table here. You can sort of see the table here. You can see a cup drawn here, a cup drawn here. It's just kind of different pieces just thrown everywhere. Here's the newspaper he's reading. I don't know. It's interesting stuff. It's not really my kind of stuff. I love it, but I don't think I could do it. And so Cubists were influenced by like African masks, Egyptian paintings, and then there was this cool painter named Paul Cézanne, and he used to take his paintings and he used to make things like shapely. So like, here you've got that cubist shape, and so he influenced Picasso. And then this lady over here is wearing a piece of clothing that's been influenced by the Cubist style. So there's something called Cubist poetry, where you just take like chunks of words and throw them together and make poems. So although Cubism only lasted for maybe about 14 years, it still affects art today. So it's definitely going to affect our project today. So now we are to the point of our Cubist Clover. This Clover on the left is sort of what we're working toward today. So if you look really carefully, you can see this clover outlined here. You'll notice that the clover is colored in shades of green for the most part. See all these different shades of green? And then you'll notice that the outside of the clover is colored in shades of blue. But then you'll notice all these weird lines everywhere. And every time there's a line, there's a color shift. And we're gonna, that's to simulate the idea of cutting an object across different planes and looking at it from different angles. We're gonna take that we're looking at right here, and then we're gonna make it even more cubist later by cutting it up and rearranging it. But this is our first step. So looking here, this is your clover, right? Y'all see your clover. And then look at this drawing right beside it. It is a clover that is covered with lines. And I want you to follow some of these lines. You notice that the lines do not go all the way through. This one goes from the border, and then it goes through the clover, and it stops at the next clover. This one goes all the way through, shoop. And this one goes all the way through, shoop. And this one goes all the way through, shoop. But that's about it. There's almost like a little sort of a triangle shape here. There's straight lines, but there's little lines too. There's like this little guy. He goes like just to the edge of the clover. So we're gonna work on doing those lines first. Some of your lines can go through. Some of them can stop halfway. And there's no rules, except for they have to be straight lines. Do you have another question, Ms. Church? Okay.
Do we have to draw the lines just like the picture like we just saw, or can we draw the lines however we want?
I do not want you to draw the lines just like the ones I drew, because that would be boring if we all had the same piece of art. So what I do want you to do, and I'm going to actually trace my lines with my Sharpie. I don't want you to trace your lines with a Sharpie. I'm going to do it so you can see it better. So here is my clover. I'm going to lower it. And I'm just going to take my ruler, and I'm going to decide where I want my lines that are going to go all the way through. So I only want maybe 3 or 4 lines that go all the way through. So I'm just going to randomly pick a spot, any spot that I want, and I am going to draw a line that's going to go all the way through. And I'm going to pick a couple other places where I want it to go all the way through. Maybe maybe across like this. And I'm just holding my ruler on my page and I'm drawing those lines. And maybe I want
Should it look like this?
this guy to go all the way through. Oops, I just hit my finger. Yeah. So what I want you to do then is go onto your page with your pencil and your ruler and draw me 3 lines that go all the way through. That's it. 3 lines that go all the way across the whole page. Any 3 lines, any direction.
Sophia, do you have a question?
If you do have a question, you can put it in the chat.
I don't have a ruler.
If you don't have a ruler, you can use the edge of a book. You can use anything that's flat and straight, or you can just draw the straightest line that you can draw. You can use the edge of a piece of paper as your ruler. Anything that's flat and straight. I could use my novel editing workbook here. Shoop. Anything that's going to give you a straight line. And if you don't have one, just wing it. When you have your 3 lines that go all the way through, you're going to start working on other lines. Like maybe I want to connect my 2 lines with a shorter line. Maybe I want to connect one here. Okay. Maybe I want to connect one at an angle. I don't want them all going the same direction. That would be so boring, right? So I want you to go through and just start drawing other random lines. Maybe they go from the outer edge just to the end of the first clover. You're going to make long lines and you're going to make short lines.
You like that?
Yes, that looks great, Grayson. You're going to go maybe from one clover to the end of a different clover all the way through. Maybe you're just going to make, it doesn't really matter, but make sure that every single time you draw a line, you change the angle of your ruler. You're changing it so that it's hitting a different plane, because we want this to be kind of crazy, right? Like we want this to be, we're looking at this clover on so many different levels. Something to keep in mind, the more lines you have, the more shapes you're going to have to color in. And like here, I can see that I have a really big gap of things that are going to be the same color. And maybe I don't want all those things to be the same color. So I know that I'm going to cut this in half just by putting a line from the inside of one clover to the outside of the other. So however you want to do it.
And a little roller, so that way I can color with, I can do it with the big roller if I'm making big lines, and I can do it with a little roller if I'm making little lines.
Yeah, you choose how you want to do it. Like I've got this huge gap here and I kind of like it, but I kind of don't like it. So maybe I'm just gonna go from, and then I can even draw a line from the clover to a line that I drew. I don't have to end it on the clover. I can end it on my lines. So the question is, are we using a Sharpie? You should be using a pencil to draw your lines. I'm using a Sharpie so you can see it better. Because if you're using a Sharpie, it's going to detract from the actual lines of the clover later. So you definitely want to draw these with a pencil, if you didn't hear me say that. If you did it with Sharpie, that's fine, but it would be better if you did pencil. And that way you can decide if you don't like a line, you can go back and fix it later. So. I've got a huge section here that I don't want to color. So let me see if I can cut that in half. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I don't want to draw too many lines personally. Maybe that's not the style I want to go for. Maybe I want some bigger chunks. If you want small chunks, draw lots of lines. If you want big chunks, draw less lines.
Should it look like this?
Yeah, it can definitely look like that. These are gorgeous. These are it looks really cool. It's like spiders built webs on your clovers, or like somebody took a marble with paint on it and just rolled it around. It's kind of fun. Yes, We have another question from the churches.
Using for the black paper.
The black paper will come in at the very end. Very nice. I can see a lot of great lines. Go ahead and hold up your lines for me so I can see if we're ready to move on to the next part. Joey, what's your question? Do you have a question?
Yeah, I don't have a pencil.
If you don't have a pencil anywhere in your house, do you have a pen?
Well, I have a Sharpie right here.
You can use your Sharpie if you can't find a pen or a pencil.
Okay.
Yeah. Use whatever you've got.
Okay.
That's the cool thing about art, is that we sort of get to make it up as we go. All right. Layla, you look so bored. I can't see. I like your line.
I am not bored. I'm having lots of fun doing this.
Okay. All right. So I think most of us have lines. Joey, go ahead and draw those lines now. If do you have a ruler? If not, you can just draw them as straight as you can. And for those of us that have our lines ready, we're going to move on to the next step. And we're going to start with taking our green markers. Now, we only have 3, right? Because it's really, really hard to find a whole bunch of different colored markers for a lot of different kids. But we're going to use our 3 greens, and we're going to go inside a Clover, and we're going to just start in one section. And I want to show you the trick to coloring with markers. If you scribble like circle, 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 it's going to dry out really, really, really fast. So with markers, kind of like with painting, you want to go up and down movements or side to side. You don't want to use the tip of your marker. You want to angle it so that you're using that. See that kind of how it goes to a point? It's a little bit wider. You don't want to use the very point. You want to use the side part, and you're just going to go side to side in small sections, not big sections. And then you're just going to keep filling in those sections as you go. You can outline it with the tip and then just do little side to side and fill in your little spots. And you're going to start with your Clover. You're going to start with green, and you're going to try not to get the colors, the same colors, to touch each other. So I just used my light green, and I see here that I'm touching a lot of different surfaces. So obviously some of mine are going to touch, but next to it, I'm going to maybe do my dark green. So, I mean, there will be places where your colors touch because we do only have the 3 colors, but that's okay. We want to create as much contrast and difference as possible. And see, I'm just doing little side to sides. I'm switching my colors every time as I work my way out. Oh, wait, those look exactly the same. Oops, I think I grabbed the wrong green.
Sonia, for somebody that doesn't have 3 greens, what would you like them to use inside the Clover?
What would they have? Like you mean like yellow?
Yeah. So yellow can be an option.
You can
Any
use
shades of green. We had that as a question.
Yes. If you don't have 3 shades of green, try to use a light or a dark green. If you don't, or a yellow, you can use a yellow. It is a warm color, but it will kind of work as a light green in this situation.
And for those of you that ordered kits, the teal that came in the kit is considered one of the greens, because I see that in the chat as well. That one was counted as a green.
Yes. Thank you for that. Yeah, I didn't remember the kits. Yeah, some of you will have teal and 2 blues and a purple. I would look at it as the lightest colors, the lightest shades in the color wheel, yellows and greens and blue greens are going to be in the Clover, and the darker colors, the purples and the blues, are going to be on the outside. So that's how we look at it. All right. Thank you. That was a very good question. So you're just going to keep on keeping on. You want to try to keep your lines really crisp. You don't want to necessarily go over, because we want to sort of keep that geometric look. So you want your line straight. You want to be as close to the edge as possible, and you want to fill in all the white space. So I'm doing little tiny strokes, one line at a time. little bit, little bit, little bit, and I'm filling in my space. If you do that thing where you scribble in circles or you scribble up and down or you try to go really, really fast, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of white spots and you're going to dry out your marker. So you just want to be really careful and really deliberate. You can also go up and down as long as you keep it small and do it in sections. Small and in sections. Markers are really tricky that way. If your marker is running out of ink, like mine is going to be because I have my pencil pointing, I have it pointing down. Gravity pulls all that ink down. So the more upright you can hold your marker, the better it'll be to keep all that ink at the very tip. So I'm going to let you keep coloring. And while you're doing that, I'm going to read you a book. And then later on, we're just going to pretend like mine is colored. I really should have thought about having a colored one ready to cut out, but I didn't. All right. So while you color, you can enjoy these beautiful words. A book, Smart About Art, Pablo Picasso, Breaking the Rules. Written and illustrated by True Kelly. This picture on the front, by the way, Pablo Picasso considered his greatest piece of art. This guy did thousands of pieces of art, and this was the one he considered his best. And it's basically a guy in a clown suit holding a blank canvas. So a lot of people think it's a portrait of himself. He's just a guy clowning around making art. So, you know, everybody has different tastes. That's all I'm going to say. And this book's kind of weird. It was supposedly written by a kid to his teacher. I'm going to ignore that part. All right. Pablo Picasso was born in southern Spain on October 25th, 1881. He could draw before he could talk. His first words were peas, which is short for lápiz, which is pencil in Spanish. His full name, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, was Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno Maria de los Remedios Cipriana de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz Picasso. I can't say all that.
That is the longest name I've heard in my life.
Yeah, see, he's like, I'm glad he shortened his name to Pablo Picasso, or when he had to sign his art at the end, it would have taken forever. Can you imagine being in kindergarten and having to learn how to write that name? So, you know. Anyway, that was his name. That's why he went by Pablo Picasso. He took the first and the last. It's a long name. It would just take forever to write. Just forever. His name is 103 letters long. That's amazing. All right. So I'm trying to read this through my camera. So Pablo Picasso's father was a painter and he was an art teacher, and he wanted Pablo to be an artist. By the time Pablo was 14, everybody already thought he was an artistic genius. When his dad saw how well Pablo could paint, he gave him his own paints, his own brushes, and his dad never painted again. He's like, I'm done. I'll wash my hands of painting. Pablo, you're taking over the family business. So this sketch here, he did when he was 16 years old. And he had his sister model as the sick woman and his dad modeled as the doctor. And he made this sketch and he won awards for it. And he beat out some of the best artists in Spain. So Pablo Picasso was born. Let's see. He was born in Malaga, Spain. Then he grew up here. And then they moved to Barcelona, and then they moved to Madrid, where he went to art school. So he was kind of all around Spain. And then later on in life, he moved up to Paris, France. So Picasso left home to go to school in Madrid, but he skipped his class a lot. We talked about this a little bit. He was getting tired of being told how to paint. He wanted to paint his own way. And so when he was just starting out, he roomed with his friend, Carlos Casagemas, and they were so poor they didn't have furniture. So Pablo Picasso painted furniture on the walls. Like he painted bookcases because he didn't want everything to look so bare. So It's like, I don't have furniture. I'm going to make it look like I do, which I think is kind of funny. I think Picasso was kind of a fun guy. But unfortunately, he and his friend moved to Paris and his friend died. And that made Picasso really, really, really sad. And so he started something known as the Blue Period. And so here's this guy, sad guy, playing a guitar. It even looks like the guitar is crying, right? Like this is just super sad. He didn't really get famous because of his Blue Period. It's something that art lovers started to notice later in life. Because a lot of people are like, why would I want to buy something that makes me so sad? And it's really one of the reasons that we associate the color blue with sadness was because of Picasso. He used a lot of people that were down on their luck, a lot of people that were homeless and beggars, and he painted them sort of at their saddest, worst. And like, there's a picture, like some kid tried to do a blue painting of when their cat died, right? So anytime when you look at paintings with lots of blues, you might feel maybe a little bit sad, and that has a lot to do with Picasso. Oh, I totally missed this page earlier. So Pablo Picasso fell in love in 1904, and even though they were poor, they were just like, cool, we're gonna have the best life. He started using new colors in his paintings. He got rid of the blue, started adding some bright colors. This is called his Rose Period. When you think of roses, you think of falling in love. He used a lot of pinks and a lot of reds in his work. Then it changed color, a lot of warmer hues. But his apartment, I guess, was a big mess. He often would work all night by oil lamp in the winter, and it got so cold by morning that his cups of leftover tea had frozen. Like he would just work, the fires would go, he wouldn't be in bed, he'd just be freezing and painting. He did have a white mouse that lived in a drawer, so that was pretty interesting. An American writer named Gertrude Stein was living in Paris with her mother, and she was one of the first people that liked Pablo Picasso's paintings. Because she liked him, she introduced him to other painters like Henri Matisse, and Matisse and Picasso became friends for a long time. And this is a painting of what Picasso looked like back in those days. But Gertrude Stein was one of the people that helped him get well known and famous. And this is a portrait that he did of Gertrude Stein. And when she sat for him 80 times, 80. And he could never quite get her right. And in the end, this was the final product. And everybody's like, that doesn't look anything like Gertrude Stein. And Gertrude Stein is, I love it. She loved it, maybe because it didn't look like her. But then he came out with this one. It was called Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, and it's called The Ladies of Avignon. And we looked at a little bit of that, where you can see the people are starting to break apart. We can see some of the influences of Cubism. He painted that after he did 809 sketches. 809. Can you imagine drawing this little appa here 809 times? 809 before you painted it. That is a long time. I don't have the patience to sketch something once, let alone 809 times. But that's what makes him like a really good artist, because he practiced, right? He didn't just wake up one day and be like, I'm going to paint all sorts of weird pieces of art. Weird and amazing. But no, he sat down with his pencil. He had his little sketchbook. I have my sketchbook. He sat down. See, like here, I was trying to draw a rose. So I couldn't figure out how to get it the first time. And then I tried the second time. And then I got a little bit better by the third time. And if I did it 806 more times, I would probably have an amazing rose. And that's sort of how it worked. You know, you just sketch, you keep going, you keep trying, and then eventually you get what you want to do. He was definitely like to practice. He also didn't mind breaking the rules, right? People thought paintings should look real. People shouldn't look like they're falling apart. But, you know, whatever, he didn't care. So The painter Georges Braque was also breaking all the rules of art. He and Picasso both started painting with only a few colors and breaking up pictures into cubes or geometric shapes. They were trying to paint things from all angles at once, from the front, from the sides, from the bottom. This is the portrait that I showed you earlier of the man who owned an art gallery. He was one of the only people that liked this style of art, which is called Cubism. So we already talked about it. You can see parts of his face. And then here's a little Picasso in the corner saying, I paint objects as I think them, not as I see them. So he didn't paint what he saw, he painted what he thought. So that's interesting. Braque and Picasso worked together for 5 years. They saw each other every day. They went on vacations together. Braque said he and Picasso were like roped together mountaineers. And so what that means, if you're climbing a mountain together and you're roped together, if you get to the top, you get to the top together. But if you fall together. So their destinies were sort of tied to each other. So here's a Picasso painting and here's a Braque painting. So very similar in the beginning of breaking up those cubes. And they don't mention Juan Gris here, which is too bad, but then they sort of came up with this idea of collage. Picasso and Braque began sticking things in grease on cloth or pieces of paper, or even trash on their own paintings. They used stencils and lettering, and this new kind of art was called collage, which comes from a French word meaning to stick. So it makes sense that you glue things on collage because you're actually literally sticking it to it. Like here, he stuck an actual rope around his piece of art and some wicker from a chair. He went to Rome to draw some sets for a ballet. He'd never actually even seen the ballet before. And he fell in love with a ballerina named Olga. And they got married. And when he painted this portrait of her, a lot of people got mad. They're like, why is your portrait so normal? Because we're starting to get used to all these weird things that you're doing. And so like, how dare you paint something that's real? But that's just what he wanted to do. You know, this is somebody that he cared about, but she wouldn't sit for him. He actually had to use a picture of her to draw from. So it just goes to show that even though you can move on to the different kinds of art, it's always good to remember where you started. Picasso had a lot. He fell in love a lot. He had a lot of girlfriends and then a couple of wives, a couple of kids. The last time he got married, he was 80 years old. So he definitely loved to be in love. But his first love, of course, was art. So Picasso writes, painting is stronger than I am. It makes me do what it wants. So he basically said he has no control over what he paints. The paints tell him what to do. So both of these paintings on both of these pages were painted in the same year. So we've got this really kind of like these normal looking women, kind of thick, beautiful ladies. And then over here, we've got, I think it's 2 clowns and a monk and a dog playing cards. So just very broken, very cubist, just to show that, you know, you don't have to limit yourself to what kind of art you do at any given time. The reason he made these women so thick is because he used to crawl under the table as a kid, and he just had that memory of just listening to the adults talk and like these happy moments and just remembering what their legs looked like when he was under the table. So, you know, different things influence different artists. In the 1930s, you know, there was World War II. And that went on into the 40s. And Picasso had the chance to leave Paris before the Germans invaded, but he chose not to. Some people thought he was really, really brave not to leave. But he saw a lot of death and destruction. And he painted this mural that's 12 feet high and 25 feet long. And remember, he's only 5 foot tall, 5'3". So he had to go on scaffolding, and he painted this mural that was basically like death and war is terrible. And he actually became very anti-war, became a pacifist. He wanted people to stop fighting all the time. So he created this dove. Well, not this dove, but he created the peace dove. And pretty much now, all over the world, a dove is used as a symbol for peace. In fact, he named his daughter Paloma, which means dove in Spanish. So, trying to see if there's anything interesting here. Oh, okay. So after the war, after all of this stuff, he had another girlfriend because he just really just like that. And they had a son, Claude, and the daughter, Paloma. And then he was pretty happy with his family. And he played with his kids. He painted pictures of them. And there was this pottery factory in town. And so pottery would be like, like bowls and cups and vases or whatever made out of ceramics. And he began making and decorating plates, vases, and pots. He made 2,000 pieces of pottery in a year. I would love to have a piece of Picasso pottery, let me tell you. So he didn't just do paintings. He started working with pottery, which is like a 3D object, which led him sort of into sculpture. So if you look at this goat, the stomach of this goat is a basket. He's made out of 2 old milk pitchers. He basically used stuff he found lying around, like junk, and he slapped them together and made sculpture out of it. He was not just a painter and a potter. He made sculptures in bronze, and he liked to make them things that he found lying around. He's once said, "You should be able to take a piece of wood and find it's a bird," which means you can make anything out of anything. He more and more he made surprising and funny art. These claw sculptures. He was playful, and I think he had a pretty good sense of humor. So he's got like this girl jumping rope, and then he's got like this mom pushing a baby in a baby carriage. And it looks like this was made out of cake pans and parts of a real baby carriage, which is pretty funny. One of his friends, Henry Matisse, who was a well-known artist who worked with paper sculpture and collage, he passed away in 1954. And Picasso was 73 years old, and he's like, "No, I have less and less time, and yet I have more and more to say." He was afraid that he was running out of time to share his art. So he worked even harder. He found another girlfriend, and he got married when he was 80. Occasionally, he would take time out to go for a swim, whatever, still having fun. But he did, on his 85th birthday, there was the museums in Paris had shows of his work, and they had over 1,000 pieces of art to show, which is a lot, right? That's a lot. But he did pass away in 1973. He was 91 years old. And the night before he died, he was painting. He never stopped. And it is estimated that he made over 50,000 works of art. 50,000. And he's like, "If you draw, you must close your eyes and sing." Yes, Thomas, do you have a question?
I didn't have a question, but that guy falls in love a lot.
He falls in love a lot. He's just, I think artists are sometimes pretty emotional people, and they fall in and out of love pretty easily. Sometimes, not always. And I guess, really that's kind of sort of it about Picasso. At least in this book.
Miss Griffin, if
Yes.
if we are supposed to be done drawing our clovers right now, I am barely finished.
You are barely finished? Man.
Finished.
Okay, some of you are finished. So I figured that this was probably going to take a long time. If you are done with your clovers.
I'm taking my time to fill.
Yeah. If you are done with your clovers, you can start working on the outsides of your clover, which is the shades of blue. So anything that is outside of your clover, you're going to color in different shades of blue. And like the green, you're going to try not to let two of the same colors touch each other, at least not in huge places. Maybe they'll have to in little bits here and there. I got a hole in my, okay. Like that, huh? So you're going to try to fill in the whole thing. This will probably take a while. Maybe I should have found a longer book. I'm going outside the lines here. That's okay, because I'm going to cut it. So you're just going to go through and you're going to fill in all those spaces between, remembering to get into these little tiny chunks in between the clover leaves. And what's going to happen is I'm going to let you color for a few more minutes. And then right before we get to the end, I'm going to show you what the last step is. And you may have to do that on your own later, just so we stay within our time frame. Or if you get really confused, you can always, I think by tomorrow for sure, the video will be up. And so you can always look at it if you get confused. But we still have some time to color. If anybody has any questions or any thoughts about Picasso or cubism or art in general, I'd like to hear.
I have a question.
Yeah, it says anything outside of the clover can be different shades. Oh, that was an answer.
Yeah.
You could do purple on the outside of the clover too.
I was wondering, is he the Picasso who painted the Mona Lisa?
That it was not Picasso that painted the Mona Lisa. Who painted the Mona Lisa? Why am I having a brain?
Leonardo.
Was it Da Vinci? It was a Da Vinci. Okay, thank you. Like I know, like I just had this total brain lapse. No, yeah, that was Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci.
Well, I know there's one Picasso. I know there's a Picasso artist, but I just didn't know if he was that one.
Well, definitely Picasso is probably the Picasso. If you've heard of Picasso, you've probably heard of Pablo Picasso. I think maybe one of his sons became an artist, but wasn't as well known. And the thing is, Picasso isn't an artist from a super long time ago. He, his grandchildren are probably still alive. He wasn't from the distant past. I think he passed away 5 years before I was born, which really isn't that long ago. Any other ideas about art or any other kinds of art things you want to talk about? Like what kind of art do you guys like to do at home?
I like to sketch.
Oh, I have a question.
Okay, what's your question?
I don't really like to draw and stuff like that. I just like to color.
Yeah, coloring's great.
I like to draw and color, but I don't paint that much. But I do really like to draw and color.
I
That's
mostly
good.
Draw and color too. I like to also make sketches.
I mostly sketch.
Sketches and stuff.
Sketches, nice. Have you ever sketched anything 809 times?
No.
No.
I haven't either, but I think I might need to start.
I have a question.
What's your question?
Do we have to draw the outside blue?
If you want the piece of art to work as intended, you would need to do it blue. Like there's a reason that we did the outside. I know it seems like it's going to take forever. Do you have to do it? Like I always say, no, you don't have to do anything when it comes to art. It's always a choice. I don't know what it would look like with a white background with all those random lines in it.
Well, this is just my first time here, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. No, I think that's a great question. And I guess what I'll always say, because it's your first time here, is your art is your own. How you do it is entirely up to you. I give you a sample of what we're doing, and you can choose whether or not you want to do it just like me. It's totally up to you. This is definitely a really involved project. It involves a lot of time and coloring. So it can be a little exhausting, especially if you're not used to it.
Can we put the blue and purple inside the clover?
So you can, and I'm actually going to tell you the truth. I sort of did a little bit with my sample. This is the inside of a clover here, up here, and I actually have a couple shades of blue inside. I didn't put a lot in. I just put some in, just for variation. So I think that if you are going to put some blue in your clover, then maybe you also put some green outside of it, just a couple pieces here and there, and just sort of play with what you want that to look like.
What I
Again,
use the most on here is probably teal, because I have a lot of teal on this, like a lot.
so one of the things then that you can think about is maybe you really want teal. Maybe you want teal to pop. Like there's this painting at the end of the book. Boom. This isn't from Picasso's blue period, but it has a lot of blue in it. Right?
I can't hear you.
I don't know why. I'm still talking. Can anyone else hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
So sometimes you just want to add pops of color. It's hard to get an angle where my ring light isn't blinding us. So it's kind of up to you. If you want yours to be primarily teal, make it primarily teal. But one of the things that I like to think about is balance. So if I have a really dark corner up here, maybe I want to make sure that this corner is as light as I can make it. And it's really not going to matter in the long run because we are going to be cutting this piece up. But it is something that you could think about if you aren't cutting it up. It's like, where do you want to have the dark and the light?
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me either. I don't know how to talk any louder. Is my microphone broken?
You're working. We can hear you.
I can hear you.
Oh.
Maybe she's just having computer problems and should
Yeah.
probably restart her computer.
Check your audio. I mean, I'm not a tech person, but I would say make sure that your speakers are turned up. Sometimes I have issues where I think my headphones are connected and they aren't, or it switches over because life is weird. So I'm going to give you an example of where we could switch colors. If I look at my bottom corner here, I can see I've got my light, I've got my dark, I've got my teal. I don't necessarily want to do light again. So this might be the perfect time for me to bring in some green. Just a little bit. Just a tiny little bit of green. Yeah, it's outside of the clover, but it's sort of just pulling that color through. And it's my artistic choice to do that. And then if I make sure that everything else around it is still blue, then I haven't really messed with my pattern too much. Just a little tiny bit to pull one color from the inside to the outside.
I finished my clover.
You finished your clover and you finished the outside as well? If you have finished coloring the inside and the outside of your clover, first of all, good job. Secondly, I want you to sketch me something 809 times. Go. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Don't sketch something 809 times. What's going to happen in about 5 minutes is that I will show you what our next step is going to be. So you can take a 5-minute coffee break, but without coffee because
What if you're not going to be done in 5 minutes?
If you're not going to be done in 5 minutes, just keep working. You'll see what we're doing, and then you could do it on your own at home later when you're done. Sometimes, art can't really squish it into an hour, Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But as long as you know what you're supposed to be doing, as long as you have the directions, then you should be fine. You can, though, I guess I'm not really kidding. You can find something to sketch or draw while you wait if you have time, the little random piece of paper, the bottom of your clover here, if you are done. I'm having a problem in that my light blue is running out of marker. Probably because I'm holding it up and down. So we'll see how far I can get. I've almost worked my way around.
When I put my markers down, I put them face down like this so that way the ink can run back into the tip.
That's a great idea. Sometimes I put the lid on. Always put the lid on before you do this. I've learned the hard way. Sometimes I put the lid on and I shake it down. Shake, 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 shake like that. And then sometimes that shakes the ink down. There was a time I've done that without putting the lid on, and I've shaken it and I've shaken ink all over my house. So you just want to make sure you have the lid on when you try that. It's really not fun to get ink off of your walls. If you could see like the rest of my wall here, shoop, you probably can't zoom in on it. I have paint flecks all over the place from when I do the same thing with paint. Like my whole place is just painted, but sometimes you learn, sometimes you don't.
I didn't know you had a Baby Yoda because you had a Baby Yoda in the background.
Yeah, I got my Baby Yoda up there, and you can't really see. I've got Perry the Platypus, and I've got Momo and Appa, and I've got Groot, and I've got another Groot, and I have like a little tiny.
I sketched a dog and a bone.
Got a little baby Grogu. He's so cute. All right. All right. So how are we doing? Think I'm going to give you. It's yeah. So we are pretty
Not
much
even close to being done.
Clover. Now I need to do the background.
okay. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do next, and you can do this later. I forgot to grab my other piece. I'm just going to flip this over. So this is sort of an easy thing to do, and you should be able to do this on your own. The hardest part, I think, is going to be when you glue it on. But you're on the back of your Clover, there's a grid, right? And this grid has lines, and you're basically just going to cut on those lines, which I'm doing without actually being able to see them. I'm going to hope that I'm close enough. And I'm going to take my Clover and I'm going to cut it apart like puzzle pieces. I'm going to cut on my grid. I'm going to get my little square shape. Okay, so right now I've got my Clover cut out as a square on one side. And there's lines that you're going to cut along, all the dark lines. And then I have my grid on the inside, and it's in 9 pieces. So I am just going to magically, without seeing what I'm doing, cut on all those lines. And what I'm going to end up with is 9 squares of Clover. Okay, so got 3 things of 3.
Miss Griffin, you're ruining the art.
This is, am I ruining the art, or am I creating a different style of art? Maybe I'm ruining the one that's colored, but I am also creating what we are going to turn our cubism into collage cubism. And remember, collage means to stick, which means we will be taking these 9 squares and we will be sticking them together to make our collage. This one I have to flip over because I can't see the line at all. Okay, so I have my pieces of Clover. So the next thing I'm going to do is it's a little bit complicated, but also not really complicated. You have to decide where you want to stick your puzzle piece. Your black background is bigger than your Clover. So you have to decide if you want to paste your Clover portrait up and down and have extra black at the top and bottom. Or you have to decide if you want to paste your Clover landscape side to side and have extra black on the sides. So I think for today, I'm going to do it landscape. And I want to find the center of my picture. And the only way to do that, for me, I can measure it with my ruler, or I can do this really cute thing where I just fold it in half once, right? And then I fold it in half twice. I'm just doing little pinches. And then I know that where my two folds meet is the center of my black paper. Okay. You don't have to get it exactly center, but close enough. But my center here, I can mark it with my pencil. Can't really see it, but I put an X. I put an X right in the middle. That's my center. Or at least where I think my center is. I'm going to randomly pick one of my pieces of clover. I'm going to glue the back. And then I'm just going to stick it right there in the center. That's
You
it.
didn't tell us we needed glue.
Yeah, I think I did. If you don't have glue, find some. Or don't cut your paper because it'd be hard to put it back together. I'm going to take my clover and I am not going to reassemble it exactly the same as it was because I want it Cubist style. So I'm just going to randomly put my other pieces around it. I've got my centerpiece, so I'm going to put one on top of it. I'm going to put one below it. And I didn't cut mine exactly perfect, so all my squares aren't exactly the same. But I am not trying to line up any lines. I am not trying to recreate my clover. I am just gluing them on. I'm deciding where I want my colors to face, what I want them to look like. So I've got a light, so maybe I want a dark right here. No? And I am just gluing them on to recreate my grid of 3 by 3. I almost said by 3, but then that would have been.
Why did you tell us we needed a Sharpie if we're not using the Sharpie?
We are going to use the Sharpie. So if you have a little bit of patience, we'll get to the end. And then
Did you tell us to do it on the 4-leaf clover page?
Yep.
Or the okay.
Yeah, do what, sweet, on the 4-leaf clover page? The Sharpie or
No.
the cutting?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so there should be a grid on the back of your 4-leaf clover page if you got one from us. If you didn't get one from us, then there's one available on the website that you could print out and kind of hold over it. Or you could just not cut it if you don't want to, or you can just measure it and cut it into 3 by 3 grid.
Because
Yeah.
I thought you said to color it on the 4-leaf clover page.
Color the what? The Sharpie?
No, I mean like all the colors.
Yes, you were coloring all the colors on the, you don't have to color on the grid page. That was just a line that you would use for cutting. Does that make sense? So all of your coloring should be on the clover. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have now reassembled my clover, sort of. It's obviously not in the same shape. It's, it's not colored. If it was colored, it would look different. So now I have my grid back up in. Do you see that? It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. It's in random places, but I've sort of lost the shape of my clover.
Can you turn?
Sorry? Let's check out the chat, see if you have any questions. You can use tape, yeah. Very nice, Naya. So the last thing that you're going to do is you're going to find those lines of the clover and you're just going to trace them.
I don't know what you just said.
The last thing you're going to do after you have everything glued on is you're going to find the lines of the clover. Only the lines of the clover, not the ones you drew. And you are going to retrace your clover. And this is one of the reasons that I asked you to write in pencil, because it's a lot easier to find your clover lines if your other lines are in pencil. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to retrace the outlines of the clover. That way we sort of have an idea of what the original shape was. Without that, we don't understand. But now we can look back and we can see all the different parts of the clover and where they were. And it just kind of gives it that little extra pop so that we know what it was that we were looking at. So it's just kind of a fun way to take an object, just a regular old clover, and see what we can do to make it unique and different and like a little bit more exciting. and then to try a different style of art, which was Cubism. You can basically take your drawing of anything you want and make it Cubist using a very similar structure ideas, you know, drawing those lines, cutting through, rearranging. Having a very hard time finding all my lines. Okay. I think I got them. So when you're done, you will have your colored sheet, your outlined clover parts. I missed a spot. And then, of course, you're going to sign your name at the bottom because every artist signs their name, which I do always in this corner. Boom. My initials. So, you know, it's just a kind of a fun and different technique. Can you see where I've outlined all my clover parts? And so you can see that they're totally at different angles. I can go back and finish coloring this later, but when you're done, you know, you're just going to have random bits of clover just hanging around in pools of color. And because we did keep those in the cool tones, it just has a very soothing sort of effect. If you were to do this in all reds and oranges, it would look like fire, right? So it's just a different way to do it. But we are over time, which means good luck. You're doing this on your own the rest of the way. Thomas, that's amazing. And so what I want you to do, because we are, oh, very nice, Grayson. Very nice. Grayson, I'm gonna spotlight you for a second. See, I'm going to give you the spotlight. So Grayson, we can see Grayson did the coloring in and cut it and then flipped it around. And Grayson, you do have some white spaces with your markers. So if you wanted to, you could go back in later and just fill in those white spaces, or you can leave it like that. And that's just your style. That's however you want to do it. But that's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. All right, so I've got some good coloring going on. I've got some dancing happening. So it looks like we're ready to move on. That I think is it, unless you have any final questions before we go. Okay, remember to go to this webpage. cwpta.com. Right there. I made it nice and beautiful. This webpage. And on that webpage, you will see this email address, cwptaprez@gmail.com. And you send us that artwork. Send us pictures of your artwork. Take a picture of it. Send that to me so that we can put you in an art gallery slideshow. I think we're working on that, right? Aren't we, Miss Tiffany?
Yes, we are. And I also typed the email address and the website into the chat if you guys need it.
Yes. Questions there? I see a hand.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, Juniper. I don't know how to help you. How do you know that? How do you know? Wait, your name isn't Juniper. You're McKenna, right? Aren't you? I can't see your face. You're so tiny. You still can't hear me, huh? I don't know. I'm sorry you can't hear me. I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do to be heard. I could be like, I could type you a message. You know what I'll say is I'll say, watch the video. That's going to be my answer. Watch the video. If you can't hear me.
I don't know what you're saying.
I know. I'm sorry. Sorry. How's you say sorry? Sorry. Don't know. All right. That's it. I'm gonna log off, finish up, send those pictures, and we will see you next time. Keep up the good work. This was a big old task. I can't wait to see when everything's done.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. And try our YouTube page. If
Bye,
you
Miss
need
Griffin.
directions. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.